When we think of ancient soldiers, we often imagine starving men surviving on stale bread and stagnant water. This image is false, at least for the most formidable army of its time, that of the Persian Empire. For more than 2 centuries, from 550 to 330, Achaemenid soldiers benefited from the most advanced logistics system in the ancient world. They ate better than most civilians of their era, and their food preservation techniques surpassed even those of the Romans. Tell me in the comments where you're listening to this story from, and if you enjoy it, subscribe to support the channel. Tonight, we're going to discover how the Persians revolutionized the art of feeding an army, how they transformed tribute into a weapon of war, and above all, why their food secrets were long concealed by Greek historians, who preferred to glorify Spartan frugality rather than admit the logistical superiority of their enemies. For behind every Persian conquest lies an unknown truth. These soldiers didn't just fight with bows and spears. They possessed an even more formidable weapon. Imagine for a moment the scale of the challenge. We're in the 6th century. Cyrus the Great has just founded an empire stretching from the banks of the Indus to the coasts of Asia Minor, a territory so vast it would take months to cross on foot. And at the heart of this imperial machine, an implacable reality: tens of thousands of men to feed every day under all circumstances. Ancient historians have left us with dizzying figures. Herodotus claims that Xerxes' army numbered 5 million soldiers. 5 million, a figure so enormous it defies comprehension. Modern specialists, armed with ruthless logistical calculations, bring this estimate down to a more plausible reality: 50,000 men, perhaps more, for the greatest campaigns. But even with this correction, the scale of the challenge remains staggering. 50,000 mouths to feed is the equivalent of an entire city on the move. Every day, tons of food must be found, transported, prepared, and distributed. In regions where agriculture sometimes struggles to feed local populations, where roads exist only in cartographers' imaginations, where the slightest miscalculation can doom an entire army to starvation. The Persians solved this impossible equation through a revolutionary innovation: food tribute. Under the reign of Darius I, around 520, the empire was divided into satrapies, those administrative provinces that formed the backbone of the Achaemenid system. Each satrapy had to provide not only gold and silver to the royal treasury, but also precisely calculated quantities of foodstuffs. Archives found at Persepolis revealed the incredible sophistication of this system. Cuneiform tablets meticulously record deliveries: 12,350 liters of wine delivered before the king, 5,350 liters of wine delivered before the king. These repetitive mentions hide a fascinating reality. The Persian Empire possessed an administration capable of planning and coordinating food supply on an unprecedented scale. But these figures raise a troubling question. Why so much wine for a royal court? Specialists have long assumed that these astronomical quantities were intended for the sumptuous banquets of Achaemenid kings. A more recent and intriguing theory suggests an entirely different explanation. A significant portion of these provisions was redistributed to elite military units. For the Persian army was not a homogeneous mass of soldiers equal before their mess tin. A strict hierarchy governed access to food, creating a system where nutrition became an instrument of power, reward, and social control. At the top of this food pyramid stood the famous Immortals, those 10,000 elite warriors who formed the great king's personal guard. The Immortals didn't eat like other soldiers. Herodotus tells us they traveled with covered wagons for their concubines, large and well-equipped retinues of slaves, and their own personal provisions, separate from those of other soldiers, carried by camels and beasts of burden. This detail is crucial. While ordinary soldiers depended on collective distribution, the Immortals enjoyed logistical independence. They carried their own reserves, chose their own food, and never risked finding themselves without supplies. This privilege wasn't just material comfort, it was strategic superiority. But the disparity went much deeper than simple logistics. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that Persian elite troops received fundamentally different nutrition from rank-and-file soldiers. Where others made do with barley and dried vegetables, the Immortals enjoyed fresh meat, quality wine, and delicacies imported from across the empire. This wasn't luxury for luxury's sake. Persian military leaders understood something that many ancient armies ignored. Well-fed soldiers fight better. A warrior who has eaten meat possesses superior physical strength to one surviving on cereals alone. A soldier who drinks quality wine maintains better morale than one rationed on brackish water. But this revelation raises an even more intriguing question. If the Persians mastered military nutrition so perfectly, why do Greek sources present them as soft and decadent? The answer lies in one of history's greatest propaganda campaigns. Greek historians, particularly Herodotus, had every interest in presenting their Persian enemies as weakened by luxury. To admit that Persian soldiers were better fed, better equipped, and better organized would have diminished the merit of Greek victories. So they developed a narrative where Spartan frugality triumphed over Persian decadence. Yet the reality was quite different. Archaeological evidence and Persian sources paint the portrait of an army where nutrition was a science, where food preservation was an art, and where logistics represented genuine technological advancement. The Persian military food system resembled a complex pyramid, where each level corresponded to precise nutritional privileges. This hierarchy wasn't arbitrary. It reflected a sophisticated understanding of the links between nutrition, performance, and loyalty. At the base of this pyramid, ordinary soldiers received standardized rations based primarily on barley. This cereal, more resistant than wheat and easier to preserve, formed the backbone of basic military nutrition. Persian soldiers consumed it in various forms, cooked as porridge, ground into coarse flour for flatbreads, or mixed with water to create a nutritious paste. But barley alone wasn't enough. Persian rations systematically included onions and garlic, foods that Greek sources mockingly present as signs of barbarian vulgarity. In reality, these choices revealed remarkable nutritional intelligence. Onions and garlic possess natural antibiotic properties, help prevent scurvy, and boost the immune system. Persian soldiers who regularly consumed these vegetables showed better resistance to diseases that decimated other ancient armies. The ration also included dried cheese, another stroke of genius. In an era before refrigeration, cheese represented one of the few ways to transport proteins and calcium over long distances. Persian techniques for drying and preserving cheese allowed armies to carry weeks of provisions without spoilage risk. Yet this basic diet, while superior to what most ancient armies received, was nothing compared to what the Immortals enjoyed. These elite warriors had access to fresh meat, a privilege almost unimaginable for ordinary troops. But where did this meat come from in the middle of military campaigns? The answer lies in one of the best-kept secrets of Persian military education. From the age of 5, future immortals learned not only to handle weapons and ride horses, but also to hunt. This wasn't recreational training. It was essential survival skill. A Persian warrior capable of tracking game, setting traps, and bringing down prey with bow or spear possessed crucial autonomy in hostile territory. Ancient sources describe these hunting techniques with fascinating precision. Persian soldiers knew how to identify animal tracks, predict game movements, and adapt their tactics to different prey. They could hunt on foot, on horseback, or from chariots, using swords, bows, javelins, or nets. This versatility made them formidable, not just in combat, but in the constant quest for food. But the most intriguing aspect of this hunting system was its social dimension. When an immortal successfully hunted game, he didn't keep the meat for himself alone. Persian military tradition demanded that the fruits of hunting be shared according to strict hierarchy. The hunter kept the choicest pieces, but distributed the rest among his companions, creating bonds of loyalty and mutual obligation. This practice had an unexpected consequence. It transformed the search for food into a social ritual reinforcing unit cohesion. Soldiers who hunted together, who shared their prey, who depended on each other for their daily sustenance, developed solidarity that no military discipline could match. Greek sources, always eager to criticize Persian customs, present these hunting practices as proof of their enemies' barbarism. Yet modern military analysis reveals their extraordinary effectiveness. Armies capable of feeding themselves locally possessed immense strategic advantage over those dependent solely on supply lines. The difference became particularly striking during long campaigns. While Greek armies often found themselves immobilized by supply problems, Persian forces could continue advancing thanks to their foraging abilities. This autonomy allowed the Achaemenids to undertake conquests that would have been impossible with a conventional logistics system. But hunting wasn't the Immortals' only food privilege. They also had access to royal kitchens' products, those famous delicacies that Greek authors describe with a mixture of fascination and disgust. Recent research has revealed the incredible sophistication of Persian court cuisine, and by extension, that of the military elite. Persian royal kitchens employed hundreds of specialized cooks. Some worked exclusively with dairy products, creating delicate cheeses and fermented preparations that could keep for months. Others specialized in wine preparation, mixing grape varieties to create beverages adapted to different circumstances. Still, others devoted themselves to exotic perfumes and spices that transformed simple dishes into memorable culinary experiences. This sophistication wasn't mere royal whim. The Persians understood that good food possessed psychological power. A soldier who occasionally enjoyed a refined meal, who tasted flavors reminiscent of home, who felt valued through the quality of his nutrition, showed better morale and greater loyalty. Yet, this system created obvious tensions. How could ordinary soldiers accept that their companions ate better simply because of their elite status? The Persian response to this challenge reveals remarkable political intelligence. While Greek and Roman armies often found themselves paralyzed by spoiled provisions, Persian forces possessed conservation techniques that bordered on the miraculous. Archaeological discoveries and ancient texts reveal methods so effective they sometimes seem to belong to a much later era. The foundation of these techniques lay in Persia's unique geography. The Iranian plateau, with its extreme climate variations, had forced local populations to develop extraordinary preservation skills over millennia. The Persians didn't invent food conservation. They perfected and systematized ancestral methods. Take salt, for example. While other civilizations used it sparingly due to its cost, the Persian Empire controlled some of the world's richest salt mines. The famous blue salt of Persia, still extracted today, possessed unique properties that made it exceptionally effective for preservation. Its particular mineral composition not only prevented bacterial growth, but also enhanced the flavor of preserved foods. Persian soldiers carried blocks of this precious salt during their campaigns. But they didn't just use it to season their meals. They mastered complex salting techniques that could preserve meat for years. Recent archaeological experiments have recreated these methods, revealing that Persian salted meat could indeed remain edible for over a decade. The drying process was equally sophisticated, where other armies simply exposed meat to sun and wind, hoping for the best. Persian military engineers had developed portable drying systems. These ingenious devices, described in fragmentary texts, used controlled airflow and gradual heating to eliminate moisture without damaging nutritional properties. But the most impressive aspect was smoking. Persian forces carried special aromatic woods that, when burned, produced smoke with natural preservative properties. Cedar, juniper, and certain desert shrubs created environments hostile to bacteria while imparting distinctive flavors to smoked foods. Archaeological analysis of Persian military sites has revealed traces of these smoking installations. Circular stone structures with precisely calculated ventilation openings. These weren't improvised campfires. They were sophisticated food processing units that could transform fresh meat into provisions lasting months. The results were spectacular. Where Roman legionaries often had to discard spoiled food, Persian soldiers could rely on reserves that remained edible throughout the longest campaigns. This advantage proved decisive during sieges, desert crossings, and winter campaigns where resupply was impossible. But preservation wasn't limited to meat. Persians had also developed revolutionary techniques for vegetables and fruits. They knew how to dry grapes to create raisins that kept their nutritional value, how to ferment vegetables to make them both more digestible and longer-lasting, how to preserve fruits in honey to create energy reserves. These methods weren't random discoveries. They reflected profound understanding of chemistry and biology. Persian preservation masters knew that certain spice combinations prevented spoilage, that specific drying temperatures optimized conservation, that particular fermentation processes enhanced nutritional value. The contrast with contemporary armies was striking. Greek sources themselves acknowledged the superiority of Persian provisions. When Alexander's troops discovered Persian food stores after their victories, they marveled at the quality and quantity of preserved foods. Some provisions, prepared years earlier, were still perfectly edible. This superiority had strategic implications that historians have often underestimated. An army with reliable food reserves possessed enormous advantages. It could take greater risks, venture into hostile territories, maintain sieges longer than its enemies. Persian preservation techniques were, in a very real sense, a military weapon. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this system was its sustainability. where other armies exhausted local resources and left famine in their wake. Persian forces often improved the food situation in conquered territories. They brought preservation techniques, introduced new crops, established supply networks that benefited local populations long after military campaigns ended. This approach wasn't pure altruism. It was intelligent strategy. Populations that benefited from Persian presence were more likely to remain loyal, to provide information, to resist enemy incursions. Food became a tool of political control as effective as military force. Yet these techniques remained closely guarded secrets. Persian preservation masters formed closed guilds that jealously protected their knowledge. Training was long and complex, passed down from father to son, from master to carefully chosen apprentice. The loss of this knowledge after Alexander's conquests represents one of history's great technological catastrophes. Modern food scientists who have studied Persian preservation methods express amazement at their sophistication. Some techniques weren't rediscovered until the 19th century. Others remain partially mysterious, their exact mechanisms still debated by specialists. When Persian armies set out to conquer the world, they carried with them not just weapons and ambitions, but an entire mobile food infrastructure that revolutionized the very concept of military campaigning. The logistics of feeding tens of thousands of men across thousands of miles represented a challenge that the Achaemenids met with typically Persian ingenuity. The foundation of this system lay in meticulous advance planning. Months before a campaign began, Persian quartermasters would dispatch agents along projected routes. These scouts weren't just gathering military intelligence. They were conducting comprehensive food surveys. Which regions could provide grain? Where were the best hunting grounds? What local specialties might supplement military rations? This information fed into a logistical machine of staggering complexity. Persian armies traveled with massive baggage trains that dwarfed those of their enemies. But these weren't just collections of wagons and pack animals. They were mobile food processing facilities, portable mills for grinding grain, smoking equipment for preserving meat, fermentation vats for producing alcoholic beverages, everything needed to transform raw materials into military rations. The organization was remarkably sophisticated. Different animal species carried different types of provisions. Camels bore the heaviest preserved foods that could withstand harsh treatment. Horses carried more delicate supplies that required careful handling. Donkeys transported cooking equipment and processing tools. This specialization minimized spoilage and maximized efficiency. But the most ingenious aspect was the way Persian armies integrated with local economies rather than simply plundering them. Unlike many ancient military forces that devastated regions they passed through, Persian commanders often negotiated for provisions. They paid in silver, offered protection, established trade relationships that could last for generations. This approach had multiple advantages. Local populations were more likely to cooperate with armies that brought economic opportunity rather than destruction. Information flowed more freely when people saw Persian forces as customers rather than raiders. Most importantly, regions that benefited from Persian passage often provided future support during subsequent campaigns. Yet, the Persians weren't naive about the realities of warfare. When negotiation failed, they could switch to more aggressive procurement methods with terrifying efficiency. Persian armies were capable of systematic foraging that could strip a region bare within days. But even this destruction followed careful patterns designed to maximize food acquisition while minimizing resistance. The foraging system itself revealed Persian tactical brilliance. Instead of sending out random raiding parties, Persian commanders organized systematic sweeps that covered entire regions methodically. Advance units would identify resources, main forces would collect them. Rear guards would process and preserve anything that couldn't be consumed immediately. Special units of soldiers trained specifically in rapid food procurement could descend on a target area and extract everything edible within hours. They knew which grains stored best, which animals provided the most meat, which preservation techniques could be implemented quickly in field conditions. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Persian campaign logistics was their flexibility. When standard supply lines failed, when local resources proved insufficient, when unexpected delays threatened starvation, Persian armies possessed multiple backup systems. They could switch from grain-based to meat-based diets, from local procurement to long-distance transport, from individual to collective provisioning. This adaptability proved crucial during the famous Greek campaigns. When Xerxes invaded Greece in 480, his army faced unique challenges: hostile populations, unfamiliar terrain, extended supply lines across hostile territory. Yet Persian logistics proved remarkably resilient. Greek sources, despite their bias, acknowledge the impressive scale of Persian provisioning during this campaign. Entire regions were required to stockpile months of supplies in advance. Local rulers received detailed specifications about the types and quantities of food required. The coordination involved must have been extraordinary. But the campaign also revealed the limits of even Persian logistics. As the army penetrated deeper into Greece, supply lines became increasingly vulnerable. Greek harassment of Persian foraging parties began to tell. The famous battles at Thermopylae and Salamis weren't just military defeats. They were logistical disasters that severed crucial supply routes. Yet even in defeat, Persian food systems demonstrated their superiority. When Greek forces overran Persian camps, they discovered provisions of a quality and variety that amazed the victors. Preserved foods that remained edible after months of campaigning, wines that had traveled thousands of miles without spoiling, delicacies that provided both nutrition and morale. The contrast became even more pronounced during Alexander's subsequent conquest of the Persian Empire. As Macedonian forces advanced eastward, they increasingly relied on Persian logistics systems they discovered. Alexander's ability to maintain his army across such vast distances owed much to the food infrastructure the Achaemenids had already established. Modern military historians studying these campaigns express amazement at Persian logistical achievements. Moving and feeding armies of this size across such distances remained challenging even in the 20th century. The Persians accomplished it with pre-industrial technology, relying on careful planning, flexible execution, and profound understanding of the relationship between food and military success. In the Persian military tradition, food served purposes far beyond mere nutrition. Elaborate banquets held before crucial battles represented sophisticated psychological warfare, designed to inspire troops, intimidate enemies, and demonstrate the empire's overwhelming power. These events reveal a level of strategic thinking about morale and motivation that was centuries ahead of its time. The most famous of these pre-battle feasts occurred when Cyrus the Great was still consolidating Persian power, preparing for his decisive confrontation with the Medes. Cyrus organized what ancient sources describe as the founding banquet of the Persian Empire. He gathered tribal chiefs from across Persia, slaughtered every animal his father owned, and prepared a feast of unprecedented magnificence. This wasn't mere celebration. It was calculated political theater. By demonstrating his ability to provide such abundance, Cyrus was proving his capacity to reward loyalty and deliver on promises of prosperity. The message was clear: follow me, and your tables will always be full. The chiefs who attended that banquet became the backbone of his expanding empire. This model was replicated throughout Persian military history. Before major campaigns, commanding officers would organize elaborate banquets for their troops. These weren't simple meals. They were carefully orchestrated displays of abundance, designed to build confidence and loyalty. Soldiers who witnessed such plenty could hardly doubt their leaders' ability to provide for them throughout the coming campaign. The psychological impact was enormous. Warriors who had eaten richly, who had tasted delicacies normally reserved for the wealthy, who had been treated as honored guests rather than mere soldiers, fought with enthusiasm that discipline alone could never inspire. They weren't just defending the empire. They were protecting a way of life that had tangibly rewarded them. But these banquets served another crucial function. They were intelligence operations. During the festivities, commanders could observe their men's morale, identify potential problems, reward exceptional service, and build the personal relationships that held ancient armies together. A well-timed compliment over shared wine could secure a warrior's loyalty for life. The ritual aspects were equally important. Persian military banquets followed elaborate protocols that reinforced hierarchy while celebrating collective achievement. The great king or his representatives sat in positions of honor, but even the lowest-ranking soldiers received quality food and respectful treatment. This balance between authority and inclusivity strengthened military cohesion. Religious elements added another dimension. Persian military feasts often included sacrifices to Ahura Mazda and other deities, creating spiritual bonds that complemented material ones. Warriors who had shared sacred food, who had participated in religious rituals together, who had been blessed by the same priests, developed connections that transcended normal military discipline. The redistribution system that characterized these banquets revealed sophisticated understanding of military psychology. Following ancient tradition, successful hunters and foragers would share their bounty according to strict protocols. The choicest portions went to commanders and honored veterans, but everyone received something. This system created complex webs of obligation and gratitude that strengthened unit cohesion. Enemy reactions to these banquets provide fascinating insights into their effectiveness. Greek sources frequently describe Persian pre-battle feasts with a mixture of admiration and disgust. They admired the abundance, but criticized what they saw as excessive luxury that would weaken Persian resolve. History proved them wrong repeatedly. The contrast with Greek military customs was striking. Spartan warriors famously survived on black broth and barley cakes, viewing privation as character building. Persian soldiers enjoyed varied, flavorful meals that maintained both physical health and psychological well-being. Which approach produced better warriors remains a matter of debate, but there's no question which produced happier ones. These banquets also served diplomatic functions. When Persian armies encountered potential allies, Elaborate feasts could seal agreements more effectively than formal treaties. Shared food created bonds of hospitality that ancient cultures considered sacred. Leaders who had dined together found it much harder to betray each other subsequently. The economic implications were staggering. The resources devoted to military banquets could have supported entire cities for months. Yet Persian leadership considered this investment worthwhile. Well-motivated troops required fewer officers to maintain discipline, showed greater initiative in combat, and remained loyal even in difficult circumstances. Archaeological evidence from Persian military sites reveals the scale of these operations. Cooking facilities capable of preparing meals for thousands, storage areas for vast quantities of wine and delicacies, elaborate serving vessels that transformed simple meals into ceremonial occasions. The logistics of organizing such events during active campaigns must have been extraordinary. Modern military theorists studying these practices note their sophisticated understanding of human psychology. The Persians recognized that soldiers are more than fighting machines. They're human beings whose performance depends heavily on morale, motivation, and group cohesion. Food, properly used, could influence all three factors simultaneously. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Persian military banquets was their sustainability. Unlike armies that consumed everything available and moved on, Persian forces often established lasting relationships with local populations through shared meals. These connections provided intelligence, logistical support, and political stability long after military campaigns ended. The tradition reached its peak during the reign of Darius I, when military banquets became elaborate multimedia events. Professional entertainers, musicians, and storytellers joined the festivities, creating experiences that soldiers would remember for years. Veterans would recount these celebrations to recruits, building anticipation and loyalty before battles were even fought. Yet the system contained inherent contradictions. The same abundance that motivated Persian troops sometimes attracted criticism from both allies and enemies. Greeks portrayed Persian luxury as weakness, suggesting that soldiers accustomed to fine food couldn't endure hardship. Persian defeats at Marathon and Salamis seem to confirm these criticisms, though modern analysis suggests logistics and tactics, not motivation, were the decisive factors. As we reach the end of our journey through the culinary world of Persian soldiers, the image that emerges is far different from the stereotypes that have dominated historical narratives for centuries. These weren't the soft, luxury-obsessed warriors that Greek propaganda portrayed, nor were they the barbarous hordes that later Roman sources described. They were part of a sophisticated military machine that understood something fundamental about warfare. Armies march on their stomachs, and well-fed soldiers fight better. The Persian approach to military nutrition reveals a level of systematic thinking that wouldn't be seen again until modern times. Their combination of standardized rations for common soldiers, specialized provisions for elite units, advanced preservation techniques, flexible logistics systems, and psychological understanding of food's role in maintaining morale created advantages that helped build and maintain history's largest ancient empire. Their salt preservation techniques lasted longer than Roman methods. Their logistics could supply armies across greater distances than Greek systems could manage. Their understanding of nutrition's relationship to military performance surpassed that of any contemporary civilization. Most remarkably, their use of food as a tool of political control and military motivation demonstrated insights that modern armies still struggle to implement effectively. Yet perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this story is what it reveals about historical bias. For 2 millennia, Western civilization has celebrated Greek and Roman military traditions, while dismissing Persian achievements as the products of decadent despotism. The reality, as we've discovered, was far more complex. Persian military success depended not on overwhelming numbers or barbarous ferocity, but on superior organization, logistics, and understanding of human nature. The technological innovations alone deserve recognition. Persian portable mills, mobile smoking facilities, systematic preservation methods, and flexible supply chains represented genuine advances that influenced military practice long after the Achaemenid Empire fell. Alexander's conquests succeeded partly because they inherited and utilized Persian logistical infrastructure. But beyond technology lays something more profound, a different philosophy about the relationship between ruler and ruled, between army and society, between individual welfare and collective success. Persian military culture recognized that soldiers who felt valued, who were well fed and well treated, who participated in the empire's prosperity, would fight more effectively than those motivated solely by discipline and duty. This approach had limitations, certainly. The Persian system required enormous resources, complex administration, and stable political conditions. When any of these elements failed, the entire structure could collapse rapidly. The speed of Alexander's conquests reflects both his tactical genius and the Persian system's vulnerability to sudden disruption. Yet the fundamental insights remain valid. Modern military forces still struggle with the same basic challenges the Persians faced: how to maintain morale during long deployments, how to supply forces across vast distances, how to preserve food in hostile environments, how to use nutrition to optimize performance. Many contemporary solutions echo Persian innovations from 2.5 millennia ago. The story also raises intriguing questions about historical knowledge and cultural bias. How many other ancient achievements have been obscured by prejudice and propaganda? What other sophisticated systems have been dismissed as primitive barbarism? The Persian military's nutritional accomplishments remind us that progress isn't always linear, that ancient peoples sometimes understood things we're still learning. Perhaps most importantly, this investigation reveals food's power as a window into past civilizations. Through examining what Persian soldiers ate, how their food was produced and preserved, how meals were organized and distributed, we glimpse an entire world, its values, its technologies, its social structures, its understanding of human nature. Food history isn't just about nutrition. It's about the complex ways societies organize themselves to meet fundamental human needs. The Persian Empire fell more than 2 millennia ago, conquered by Alexander, and eventually absorbed into Hellenistic and Islamic civilizations. But its innovations survived, adapted, and evolved. The same salt mines that preserved food for Cyrus's warriors still operate today. The same preservation techniques that sustained Xerxes' armies influence modern food processing. The same insights about nutrition's role in performance guide contemporary military planning. So the next time you see a modern army's field kitchen, remember the Persian quartermasters who first systematized military nutrition. When you read about special forces carrying specialized rations, think of the Immortals with their separate provisions. When you learn about military logistics supporting operations across continents, Recall the Persian system that could feed armies from India to Egypt. The soldiers of the Persian Empire weren't just warriors. They were participants in one of history's great experiments in human organization. Their story, told through the food they ate, reminds us that the past remains relevant, that ancient wisdom still has lessons to teach, and that sometimes the most profound insights come from the most basic human activities. In the end, the question isn't just what Persian soldiers ate, but what their eating habits reveal about their civilization's sophistication, their leaders' wisdom, and their empire's enduring influence. The answer, as we've discovered, is both more complex and more fascinating than anyone previously imagined. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, that history, like a well-prepared Persian banquet, always offers more nourishment to those willing to look deeper than the surface. There are still mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Archaeological sites across the former Persian Empire continue to yield new evidence about ancient military nutrition. Recently discovered tablets from Babylon describe preservation techniques we haven't yet fully understood. Salt mines in Iran still contain artifacts from Persian military expeditions that might revolutionize our understanding of ancient logistics. The Persian approach to feeding armies influenced military traditions for centuries after the empire fell. Islamic armies adopted many Persian techniques. Byzantine forces inherited Persian organizational methods. Even medieval European armies unknowingly used preservation techniques first perfected in the workshops of Persepolis. But the most intriguing questions remain unanswered. How exactly did Persian field kitchens operate during active campaigns? What specific spice combinations did they use to prevent food spoilage? How did their mobile preservation units actually function? Archaeological evidence provides tantalizing hints, but complete answers elude us. Modern food scientists continue studying Persian preservation methods, seeking insights that might improve contemporary food storage. Military nutritionists examine Persian ration systems, looking for lessons about maintaining soldier morale through proper feeding. Historians debate whether Persian military success stemmed more from superior weapons or superior logistics. One thing remains certain. The soldiers of the Persian Empire weren't just warriors, conquering territory for glory and gold. They were participants in a sophisticated civilization that understood fundamental truths about human nature, organizational efficiency, and the practical requirements of maintaining power across vast distances and diverse populations. Their legacy lives on every time a modern army fields a mobile kitchen, every time special forces carry customized rations, every time military planners calculate the logistics required to sustain operations across continents. The Persian innovation of using food as both practical necessity and psychological weapon continues influencing military thinking today. So, the next time you break bread with friends, remember that sharing food has always been about more than mere nutrition. It's about building relationships, demonstrating care, creating bonds that transcend individual self-interest. The Persian soldiers who shared their hunt around campfires 2 millennia ago understood something we sometimes forget, that the most powerful human connections are often forged around a common table. Their empire crumbled, their cities fell to ruin, their languages faded into scholarly footnotes, but their understanding of food's power to sustain not just bodies, but entire civilizations echoes through the ages. as relevant today as it was when Cyrus first gathered those tribal chiefs for that legendary founding feast. In the end, what Persian soldiers really ate wasn't just barley and meat and wine. They consumed hope, possibility, and the dream of a world where abundance could triumph over scarcity, where organization could overcome chaos, where human ingenuity could solve even the most daunting challenges. That dream, like their preservation techniques, has proven remarkably durable. And perhaps that's the most nourishing discovery of all.